A while back, I had stocked up on papers, including some that are new to me. In recent weeks, I've tried Arches Rough and their hot pressed. Now it's Speedball's Fluid 100 hot pressed watercolor paper. Generally, I prefer pads, but I couldn't find that option from this brand. So this is an 8-inch by 8-inch block. On the packaging, they call it the Easy Block because, well, it's supposedly easy to remove the sheets from the block. But I guess we'll just see about that, won't we? For this project, I wanted to do the line and wash style of painting. Ink and wash, pen and wash. I've heard it several ways, but line and wash seems to be the most common. And for the subject, I was inspired by one of my favorite inkers, Charles Dana Gibson. That's my musty copy of The Gibson Girl and Her America. It's a great compilation of his illustrative work. There are some fantastic examples of inked scenes, but I wasn't going to tackle one of those. So here you'll see I'd tabbed several faces and figures. The book's title might come across as pompous, but at the time, roughly from 1890 to around 1910, The Gibson Girl was all the rage. An idealized version of the American woman seen across multiple popular magazines of the time. Remember, this was before movies, TV, and radio. Gibson was so popular that he could be called the Norman Rockwell of the Victorian era. I don't know a whole lot about Gibson, except that he was from Massachusetts and pretty much stuck with this medium for most of his art career. There's a YouTube channel called Watt's Atelier of the Arts, and they did a 5-part series called Inspirational Inkers. I was delighted to see Gibson was included. In fact, a couple of my other favorites, Wrightson and Frazetta, were also featured. If you are into inked art like I am, check it out. My love of ink started early on because I watched my older brothers as they sketched and inked Flash Gordon and Conan the Barbarian, which were not the favorite subjects of this prepubescent girl. Pretty women in armored princess gowns wielding axes or ray guns were more my thing. Of course, we were all disappointments to our mother, who couldn't understand why we wouldn't just draw some nice flowers. Here I used the Pitt Artist Pens from Faber-Castell, in sepia and in various sizes. Also, for the finest line work, I used the Winsor & Newton .1 sepia fine liner that was sent from a viewer. Without that particular pen to provide the delicate shading, the piece would probably have been a mess. Drawing and inking are familiar to me, while watercolors still surprise me after several years. I like to think of myself as intermediate when it comes to watercolor, but I still feel like a beginner in some ways. Maybe it's a touch of imposter syndrome, but mostly it's that I haven't done as much practice and research as I should have. After the Gibson Girl years, later decades had Howard Chandler Christie and Harrison Fisher. You've likely seen their paintings on postcards and other vintage ephemera. Oh, the olden days. Speaking of old things, I recently went through a big box of stuff that I'd stashed away years ago, since my last move, actually. After making my way through cobwebs and bug remnants, I found some old sketches of Gibson girlish figures. They weren't great, but it reminded me that I've been a fan of this stuff for a long time. That might be one of the reasons why vintage journaling appeals to me. Well, that and how it's another excuse to collect things. That square glass water jar is kinda new. I've been trying to get by with only one water container, but I decided I really did need another jar. So now the big one is for the dirtier water and the small one is for the cleaner water. By the way, I recently got one of those rolling storage carts for my studio. I didn't like the ones I'd seen in Michael's and other home goods stores because they seemed too small for my needs. But I found one online that I like the dimensions on, and now it's next to my desk and holds all of my paper pads, blocks, and sketchbooks. Even the 11-inch by 15-inch size, which is the largest I have. I'm a big fan of storage and containers. If I could, I'd pour the half-empty boxes of breakfast cereal into one container, making a delicious Honey Bunches of Fruit Loops combo mix. But producer Mike is all about the original packaging, which I admit is oftentimes a good thing. You don't want to grab a tub of gravy mix and wonder, is this brown gravy or chicken gravy? Surprise, it's both. I haven't done a lot of this sort of partial background color. Paul Clark makes it look so easy, and I'm a fan of the effect, but I maybe should have given it more thought before committing. For the most part, I'm pleased with the results, and I get why people like hot-pressed paper for this sort of work. In this case, I was able to focus more on the drawing aspect and not worry too much over what the paint was going to do. Really glad I'd limited the colors to only 3. That might have been the smartest thing about this painting. When it came time to remove the paper from the block, I had issues. Firstly, I tried to just peel it off, since that technique worked with another brand. But since that didn't work here, I tried cutting it off with a utility blade. That was also difficult, and once it was off, there were adhesive remnants that did not want to let go. Eventually, I gave up and trimmed off the 2 glued edges. That reminds me, I really need to get a replacement blade or a new paper trimmer, because that was giving me grief. So I switched to my X-Acto knife. Cutting those 2 edges made the piece lopsided, so I trimmed the other 2 sides for balance. Let me just say, Fluid 100 needs to rethink their choice of adhesive. Either that or offer this paper in loose sheet form. Maybe 20 sheets in a pouch. You could even get all fancy and call it a pochette, like the French do. If anyone has a tip on how to deal with this troublesome adhesive, please share. And if you work for Speedball, go ahead and send me free products as compensation for my distress. Regardless of glue issues, when it comes to hot pressed paper, I think I prefer this Fluid 100 over Arches. I did that thing where you turn the paper over to see the image reversed. That often reveals oddities otherwise unnoticed. In this case, it was a lopsided jawline. That's why I fussed over that area. When my inner critic says, "You made her nose too long," I answer with, "Oh yeah? Well, her forehead was too high. I fixed that, so there." I realize the Gibson Girl is a cultural relic, and there are probably those who are saying, "A Gibson what now?" But she lives on in small ways. If you've ever strolled down Disneyland's Main Street on a hot summer day, you've likely popped into the Gibson Girl ice cream parlor for an old-timey float or sundae. And if you've ever admired the hairdos on Lorraine Warren or Captain Janeway, well, those were total Gibson-style knockoffs. And to whoever just said, "Grandma hair," quiet you. This was a bit of nostalgia in more ways than one. I'm happy to share this foray into line and wash watercoloring. You can do it the other way around, too. Wash, then line. Until next time, remember, paint some nice flowers for your mom once in a while. And stay artsy, my friends.